They will come next year, Admiral Mineichi Koga told his staff in early 1943. They must. What he did not say aloud, but what haunted every Japanese planning room from Truk to Tokyo, was how fast they would come. By the time dawn broke over Tarawa Atoll on November 20, 1943, Japanese commanders were already behind the clock. The lagoon looked calm, too calm. Then the horizon moved. More than 500 American ships, battleships, carriers, transports pressed forward in organized silence. When the naval guns finally spoke, the sound did not roll. It flattened the island. Concrete bunkers that engineers had sworn were bomb-proof shook like paper boxes. Inside them, men of the Japanese 3rd Special Base Defense Force, commanded by Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki, pressed their hands against their ears and felt the air thicken, as if the island itself were being squeezed. Shibasaki had boasted months earlier it would take 1,000,000 men 100 years to take Tarawa. It took the Americans 76 hours. That was the moment Japanese commanders began to understand the nightmare forming in the Pacific. Island hopping was not slow, deliberate, or cautious. It was relentless, and it was accelerating. The Imperial Japanese Navy had built its defensive doctrine on distance. The Pacific was supposed to be a moat, vast, punishing, and exhausting. Each island was to bleed the enemy, delay him, and buy time for a decisive counterstroke. But by February 4, 1944, that theory lay drowned beneath the wreckage of Operation Hailstone. At Truk Lagoon, long considered Japan's Gibraltar of the Pacific, American carrier planes arrived with terrifying precision. On February 17 to 18, 1944, aircraft from Task Force 58 under Vice Admiral Mark Michener struck wave after wave. Japanese pilots scrambled too late. Anti-aircraft crews fired blindly into clouds already empty. By the end, over 250 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 40 ships sunk, fuel depots burning for days. Senior officers watched from bunkers as the anchor of their Central Pacific defense evaporated in 48 hours. What stunned them was not just the destruction, but the tempo. There was no pause, no long consolidation, no drawn-out siege. The Americans did not stop at Truk. They went around it. On January 31, 1944, U.S. Marines stormed Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Japanese planners had assumed Kwajalein would be bypassed later after months of preparation. Instead, it was hit early with overwhelming force. The defenders, elements of the 6th Base Force and 61st Guard Force, were under-equipped, undersupplied, and psychologically unprepared. They had trained for attritional defense, not annihilation from sea and sky. American artillery registered targets with mathematical calm. Naval gunfire walked across the islands like a metronome. By February 7th, Kwajalein was gone. In Tokyo, staff officers spread maps across long tables and began drawing circles, then erasing them. Islands once labeled essential were suddenly irrelevant. Others, once thought safe for years, were now exposed in months. One naval officer wrote privately in his diary, "The enemy advances like water poured onto a table. It finds every weakness at once." The speed reached a new level at Saipan, June 15, 1944. Saipan was not supposed to fall quickly. It was part of the inner defensive ring, garrisoned by over 30,000 Japanese troops, including the 43rd Infantry Division under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, with naval forces commanded by Vice Admiral Chuichi Naguma, the same man who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor. American planners expected weeks of resistance. Japanese commanders believed they could still turn the tide. Instead, within 9 days, American forces had secured enough of the island to make the outcome inevitable. What crushed Japanese morale was not just defeat, but the realization that their response lagged days behind American movement. Orders arrived too late. Reinforcements never came. Naval support vanished after the catastrophic defeat in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, June 19th to 20th, 1944, where Japan lost over 400 aircraft, so many that pilots grimly called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. From the cliffs of Saipan, officers listened to distant explosions and understood something unspeakable. The war was now running on American time. Island hopping was not random brutality, it was calculated acceleration. American intelligence, aided by codebreakers in Hawaii, identified which islands mattered and which could be isolated and starved. Places like Rabaul, once a cornerstone of Japanese defense, were bypassed entirely. By late 1944, over 100,000 Japanese troops sat stranded there, fully armed, slowly starving, listening to American aircraft pass overhead toward other targets. This was psychological warfare at an operational scale. Japanese commanders faced an impossible choice: defend every island and be spread thin, or concentrate forces and watch the Americans simply skip past them. Either way, the clock kept ticking. By the time U.S. forces landed on Leyte on October 20th, 1944, General Tomoyuki Yamashita reportedly told his staff, "We have already lost the war." Not because Japan lacked courage or discipline, but because speed had become a weapon. American logistics functioned like an industrial bloodstream. Floating docks, Seabees building airstrips in days, supply ships arriving with mechanical regularity. A captured Japanese officer on Peleliu, September 1944, remarked in disbelief at the quantity of American equipment abandoned and replaced without hesitation. He said, "They throw away what we would die to keep." For Japanese soldiers, the psychological strain was immense. They waited months for an invasion that might never come, only to learn later that the enemy had already landed somewhere else, far closer to Japan. Fear took a new shape, not fear of battle, but fear of irrelevance. By February 19, 1945, when American Marines hit Iwo Jima, General Tadamichi Yamashita understood the pattern fully and could do nothing to stop it. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi did not plan for victory, he planned for delay. Every tunnel, every hidden gun was designed not to repel invasion, but to slow the American clock, minute by minute. Even then, the Americans adopted. By March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared secure. The stepping stones were nearly complete. From the perspective of Japanese high command, the war had transformed from a contest of honor and endurance into something colder, a race they could not slow, let alone win. Island hopping had stripped away illusion after illusion until only reality remained. The Americans were not advancing island by island. They were advancing by weeks, by hours, by momentum itself. And for Japanese commanders, watching pins fall across maps faster than orders could be written, the most terrifying realization was this: the ocean they had trusted to protect them had become a highway.